So this evening's webinar, I am literally asking people that are on the webinar what relevant questions they have to their property business, what challenges they've got, and I'm asking them a few more questions, in some cases answering their questions for them, moving on to the next one. If you want your questions answered, maybe you just want to join one of our webinars right at the front, in which case there'll be details below on how you can do that. On the other hand, it may well be that a very important question for you is asked within the webinar, and it'll be worthwhile you listening so you get some nuggets. I hope very much you enjoyed today's webinar. Andrew's question is, first question of the evening, how do you appraise development sites in marginal areas? There's often little local development, but new houses trade at a premium. That makes assessing comparisons hard. So let's go to Andrew. I'm going to unmute you, Andrew. Good evening to you, if you unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi. Are we talking about development projects and that type of thing? And you mentioned I'm breaking up.
I've got.
Let me just jump on
Yeah, you're okay at the moment.
Okay, all right then. Go on then.
I know that sometimes you have to switch your internet connection before the
let me do that
signal
now.
clears up, basically. But you're okay right now.
Okay, all right. Well, if it changes, then let me know and I'll jump on my 4G.
Yeah, I'll give you a shout if there's a problem. So yeah, I've got development sites in places like Accrington, Merthyr Tydfil, and Sunderland lined up. Well, the Sunderland one failed to sell at auction after I got planning permission for development. So I didn't go ahead with that one, and I'm trying to avoid repeating the experience. But the issue is that if you're in lower income parts of the country, then it's often difficult to work out what a new build property would sell for, because there is a huge premium for new build properties, but very little development. So you can be selling a property that's ostensibly next to a house that's maybe 60 grand, but the one that you're building might sell for, in theory, several times that, because there's a big premium. Now, the difficulty is working out what that premium will be. I mean, it's not unreasonable to assume a 15-20% premium for a new build, but if you're in a more deprived area, then you might be seeking selling the property 2 or 3 times what the adjacent property is sold for. But
I'm not aware.
There's a big negative.
Yeah, I'm not aware of, if there's a 3-bed 1930s house opposite, I'm not aware that a same square footage property would sell just because it's new for 3 times that. The London premium, for instance, second-hand properties in the bracket that I'm doing quite a few development projects in, are kind of the 400 grand second-hand, 400, 420 second-hand 2-bed apartments, okay? And a new build.
Yeah, so London's very different. I mean, the areas that I'm talking about is, the ex-industrial areas, and what you certainly do find. So if you go to places like Blackburn, you might find properties that are on the periphery of the town selling for, 280 for a 2-bed flat or something like that, or for a 3-bed house. And then you might find in the centre of the town people paying, 40 to 80,000 pounds for a terrace house, right? And they're, 2 miles apart, and they're not a massively dissimilar value. Slightly nicer setting, but the fundamental sort of square footage and the town amenities are broadly the same. You have this enormous gulf in the property values.
What I was leading to is, first of all, a new build has got the Help to Buy scheme attached to it normally, and so something that may be 150 grand, you're talking about needing a 45 grand deposit for. But if it's 200 grand in a new build, you're talking about needing 10 grand. So that's one of the factors that influences it. But I just don't like developing in low value areas. I've not. I'm actually you highlighting this. I'm not aware of a huge difference between values. I mean, I know places like city centre towns, like Leeds, for instance. City centre apartments are far dearer than ones 2 miles away. So I'm aware of that stuff. But little towns like Accrington, which I know quite well because my granddad used to live there. I've not been there for however many years, but I know the name very well, so I know where it is. He had a open all hours type shop up there. So yeah, I'm not and never come across anything where there's such a huge difference. Yes, if it's town centre and outskirts, I get it, but I've just not seen that, and I know because if there's no comparables, it makes it very hard. If it will set a premium. Have you thought about getting some, doing some sort of option on it and getting the CGI?
Yeah. I'm always trading options. I'm never buying the underlying security, but still, I don't want to spend. For example, the Sunderland property. It was 4 houses in a row, and I was converting them to flats. And I got planning permission to turn them into 15 flats. So it's like a shop and 3 houses in a row, and I've got 15 flats.
But that normally wouldn't.
I couldn't get back.
No, I mean, even if you've got planning, the cost of the conversion normally outweighs the end value.
It's very often the case that I've seen a lot of people like Jim Hayburton, for example, who's done a lot of work doing conversions and stuff in relatively poor areas, but in Sunderland, despite having got planning permission, I still couldn't get the development away, and I don't want to. I lost not a catastrophic amount of money on that, probably late 20s, something like that. Just in both professional fees and option money and stuff. So yeah, I've learned the lessons. I run a leaner operation now. I don't generally pay for options, whereas in the past I would be happy to pay for them. But still, I don't want to go through the process and repeat it and end up, getting planning permission for something and then finding out that
it doesn't
that I can't get it away. Do you know of a way to get comparables done, by a third party that would give some comfort and confidence? Because my own assessment of the comparables values are not necessarily particularly reliable because, I don't have a detailed knowledge of that area. I don't know the microscopy of which streets are seen as rough streets and which streets are seen as good streets. And,
how about
paying more for property area, that kind of stuff. It's very difficult to assess your own site, so I find.
Yeah, I know, and it is very hard up north specifically. I just never find stuff values up enough to warrant doing a building project up there. My new stuff in the southeast, but I've moved now, so I'm only really considering stuff in the London commute belt. You don't generally get that problem. No,
if you get a site, it will stack, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to have a situation where you just can't build it out and sell it at a profit, as long as it's just a matter of what you negotiate for the land. The land always has a value.
Yeah.
But in certain parts of the country, land with planning has nil value, right? And it's trying to identify whether you're in one of those areas or not.
Yeah.
And it's very...
And sometimes the maths says it's worth negative. Somebody would have to pay me to build on their site because otherwise you're building it.
My versatility, for example.
So I lost you.
So there's a bit of a lag here, so I have to avoid talking across. My apologies. But what I'm saying, the Merthyr Tydfil site is going to be like between 15 and 25 houses, so it's quite a big site. And you don't need to have a large plot value to make some money on the site. But the point is, you only have to have a tiny little diminution in the value of the properties, and you go from, if I'm buying at 10 grand a plot and selling at 15 grand a plot, that's a reasonable margin. It's a nice little flip doing some planning work, right? But the problem is that if you're buying at 10 grand a plot and then you're selling at either 5 grand a plot or negative 5 grand a plot, then it's a fool's errand. You're never going to make any money. And even if you've done it on an option, then you're just going to end up losing your professional fees and get nothing out of it.
I would say, and this surprised me when we were looking at doing something in the Leeds area, and we had a plot for about 12 properties, and we contacted some of the larger house builders, and asked how much they pay per acre, okay? And the national house builders, how much they pay for an acre, and then you can kind of work out densities in different parts of the town by having conversations with the council. How, in principle, not about specific postcode, but in this type of area, what would be your policy for the density? Okay, so the house builders normally have a price per acre that they would pay, and literally I was expecting.
Is that information readily available?
No, you just need to keep on, Google Barrett's buyer and just be connected with one of the buyers. They're fairly easy to connect with. If you say that you're getting land all the time, if I call you from time to time with a different area, could you let me know? And even though some of the projects are too small for them, you can still ratio it out to what they pay per acre to then value the plot. And I was surprised that the area we were looking at, they were paying 20 grand an acre. Which...
but that was it.
Sorry?
Was that with planning, or was that just buying it on hope value, where it's just a feel?
No, that was with planning. Now...
Jesus, that's really low.
Yeah, and then... So that, I was expecting to be selling it for 20 grand an acre, more, far more than that. So it was just an eye-opener to me at that time. And the bigger builders, they can bring in the build cost much cheaper than most local builders, because of their whole project is just streamlined. They're building at 110, 120 pound a square foot, because of the smoothness of their whole operation. Personally, I just pretty much stay away and keep focusing on the south of England, where it is easier and they do have a value. Alternatively, if you wanted to get really creative, and this is me just thinking out the box, shared ownerships very much for a 30% premium get quite a premium on the actual value, So
definitely looking at social housing providers.
But I'm not talking about social housing. I'm talking about shared ownership, because if you run a shared...
You can't do shared ownership to a registered social housing provider.
Can't you? Okay, all right.
Well, I listen to them. Okay. You have to know ourselves, do that.
Right. Okay. So.
You can do shared ownership. You couldn't mark shared ownership scheme because that has a specific legal meaning, and it's very unlikely that you'd be able to raise finance, because the major banks would not ordinarily not lend for shared ownership, so unless it's run by a registered social housing.
Hey, I'm just getting around the whole thing by potentially building in a limited company and letting an individual have a 20% share in the property.
You could do something like that, but they'd be fine cash typically.
They'd need cash for whether or not they can get a loan on their shared ownership bit is a whole different thing. But I just wonder whether you could come up with a process that would work, something around them leveraging off the premium of shared ownerships.
Yeah, that possibly might work. I think what I'd ideally like to identify is some way of doing. I'd happily pay, a grand or so to have some solid comparables, and now somebody else look over the site and say, this, I'm confident this will work, or I'm confident this won't work.
So why don't you have
somebody with a degree of knowledge of the local market, in terms of the value of both completed sites and plots with planning? And the problem is I just haven't identified readily available. There's no readily available way that I'm aware of to get transparent valuation. Like an auctioneer is quite good at valuing sites. give me a view. But it's a bit of work for them. They're a bit funny about doing it. So they don't really want to do it unless it's a site that you've got planning on already, which kind of defeats the entire point of the exercise. Right?
How about setting your own right move bit up that's or leveraging off the back of somebody else's right move and putting properties on right move and just putting CGIs in kind of the area where you're thinking of going and seeing what response you get to buy an off plan.
Yeah, could do that. I think one of the other things I tend not to do, but I'm going to put in my diary, I think it's a pretty good idea, is start ringing some local agents and saying what they think the finished blocks will go for, because that's if they're going to know the market reasonably well, and hopefully be able to go from there. I mean, that it's a fallback. I haven't used it much because I've had some bad experiences with agent valuations.
They normally go over.
You can't get easy valuations. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying your idea of putting stuff on Rightmove is a bad idea, but there's a lot of lead effort that goes into it to create CGIs to find an agent who'll run them for you, or just have a fake agent on Rightmove.
Tell you what I'd do.
Get in touch with agents.
I'd phone 3 agents, get an average value, take off 20%, and then you'll be safe.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good idea. I'll get that action. I guess you've got a stack of other questions lined up, so I'm happy to go on about this all night. But my guess, and I hope to be useful to people, but my guess is you've probably got a lot of other people who've got questions queued up. Is that a face to Ben?
Yeah, we can come back to it.
Okay, I'll duck out and then let you carry on. Thanks for your time.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Andrew. Okay. Right, so next question was... due to the pandemic, face-to-face network meetings have been done virtually. That makes meeting potential JVs difficult. Yes, you're right. But also people who want to do JVs who've got money are there, want to invest in properties. It doesn't mean now. I know if I'm at a network event and I'm looking for a specific person for something. So if I'm looking to raise cash, which is how I raised money for my very first property by going to a network meeting, or whether it's for sourcing property. In the first message that I ever put on a piece of paper when I was in a network event, and I had a deal that I needed 70 grand on, and I needed it because the person that was going to lend it to me had fallen out of bed because they were trying to refinance their property, and that wasn't going to happen on time, and I was given 7 days to exchange and complete. And so I went for a network event for the first time ever, and I ended up speaking to someone who was a mortgage broker. I ended up speaking to someone selling buy-to-let insurance, and it was as frustrating as hell. So in the end, I just wrote a sign out that said, "Need 70 grand, need it by Friday. If you haven't got it, please don't talk to me." And that got me 2 people that came to meet me that week and look at the project. So if you've got a way of posting or bringing attention to yourself at a virtual network meeting, and maybe you can set up in coffee shops now, you can meet up with people, outdoors you can meet up with people, and normally there isn't any point in finding a potential JV partner when you don't have a project, because by the time you do have a project, the chances are the JV partner will have invested in something else. Well, I do know that if you go to a virtual network event or a network event and you have a project that is good, you'll pretty much always find within 2 or 3 meetings somebody to fund it. So I'd go to the virtual meeting to say I've got a great deal in whatever area, and I'm looking for X amount of cash in return for X amount of profit, which is estimated for X. And that way I think you may end up getting finding who you're looking for. Peter said, thank you for a fantastic and eye-opening webinar yesterday. I'd just like to know what is your strategy for when after you've got planning permission or have done major development, after daily completion, it can't sell as soon as you expected, or if the project doesn't sell at all, what do you do then? As the vendor and investor will be expecting their money soon. Peter, you would provision for it in the contract. Okay. If there is an investor and it doesn't sell, potentially you can refinance or hold on to it. If there's a downturn in the market, but whatever you do when you're negotiating the contract up front, it would be very sensible to provision for a downturn, just in case, so then it doesn't end up with any misunderstandings or any problems with different people thinking different things. Okay. So yeah, that's how I would cover off. So Yogan says, on a little 2-bed that was advertised at 140 grand and dropped to 130 grand after a first viewing, it's still sitting after a couple of months. If I can get a deal agreed at say 98, arrange finance on 132 minus 5, normally a client could have an option for 98 and then they receive the difference between the agreed deal and 98, which will become my deposit on the mortgage, if I understand this correctly. Right, okay, so first of all, what you're trying to do, Yogan, is kind of what I hold hand people through the mentorship program, and it's very easy to get this wrong. And I've had somebody come to me who tried to do a deal without my help, and they rung me and said, Glenn, what would you do with this deal? And I said, I wouldn't do it because of that. And they went, oh, actually, yeah, I understand. And they actually ended up losing 80 grand over something that my 8 grand mentorship fee would have saved them. I have solicitors who structure this, and yes, I use them for my mentees only. It is very much about getting an option agreement at the lower price. It's very hard to do that if there's an estate agent involved. Try and say to the estate agent, actually, I'd like to have a friend of mine hold an option at 98, and then I'd like the vendor to sell to me at 132, and my option holder get the difference. Estate agents don't normally like that type of thing. Corporate ones, for definite, wouldn't like it. Maybe if it was with one of the minor one-man band type things, they might be, interested in trying to facilitate that and set it up. But yeah, there are a lot of things you've got to do, and you're wandering the way you're doing it right into mortgage fraud. So again, there is no grey in this. There's white and there's black. There's mortgage fraud and there's not mortgage fraud. So yeah, you're right pretty much with the structure. But you just got to be careful to make sure it's done dead right. And yeah, the solicitors I keep for my mentees for doing this type of stuff. Right, Mike says, hi Glenn, I've been approached with the potential as follows. Existing 3-storey building near Worthing, already converted commercial to resi, 15 existing luxury 2-bed flats, has planning approved for another storey of 2x2 bed and 1x2 bed. The information I have at the moment is the cost of airspace, 1,500 square foot. It's 283 grand. Build cost, so sorry, let me just grab a pen and write this down. In fact, let me jump on and actually ask you exactly where we are with this so I can work it out rather than trying to read it. Hi Mike, can you unmute yourself so we can go through the numbers?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, got you loud and clear. So,
Fantastic.
So is this on one title at the moment?
To be honest, I've only got this in this afternoon, so the information is a bit sketchy, but what I've given you is what I've got, so I'm not sure about the title.
Okay.
I think the freehold might be up for grabs as well.
Okay. So, I'd be interested to know whether it's owned in a limited company, because if the whole thing's owned in one limited company and maybe on one title, then potentially you can buy it and pay 0.5% stamp rather than the normal going rate for stamp. Okay. The cost of building on a roof will really depend on the structure of the existing property. So normal, if you're saying there's 1,500 square foot of internal area when it's done, or 1,500 of total area when it's been built on the roof?
Yeah, again, I'm sorry, mate, I haven't really got information qualified yet.
All right.
All I was told is 1,500 square feet.
Right, okay, because there's two distinct things that is marketed, and it's GIA, which is the gross internal area. But if you're building a flat, you've got to allow for staircase space and landing space. So normally it can be anything up to 10 to 20% more than the gross internal area. Okay. If we were building off the ground, you're probably talking about £150 a square foot. Okay. Whether that's going to cost more than that because of the existing site or less, you would have to have words with builders or architects that would have a look at the structure. Obviously the slab...
They'd be given a cost already of 135 per square foot.
Okay. Because normally the slab would be quite a high percentage of the cost, and you obviously haven't got to worry about that because you're going up, yeah? So, yeah. £135 a square foot, again, is it 1,500 square foot internal or external? And then, so if you're building, how many flats in total?
There's 4 new ones, 2 2-bed and 2 1-bed.
Okay. So what's the GDV of the flats that you can build?
Well, the total GDV is 800k.
Is that the 4 flats?
The value.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 2 beds on doing comparables would go for about 210.
Yeah.
And 1 bed's for about 190.
Okay. So 400 grand, 246, 800 grand. Okay, so 800 grand, and we're talking. What's the square foot of one of the properties, do we know?
No, I'm going down on Friday to have a look at it.
Okay. Alright, look, just doing it as an average, if it was gross internal area, 1,500 square foot divided by 4 equals 375. They are going to be very small, okay? So I would say that is internal area, not external area. But 4 flats in 1,500 square foot are kind of all 1 beds. Maybe 2 of them slightly different. It's going to be difficult. Is planning already been granted?
Yes.
Okay, alright. So, an average of 375, it's not adding up to me somewhere, okay? This 1,500 square foot isn't enough space to build two beds and 2 1-beds, yeah.
Okay.
It's just not enough. It just doesn't make sense.
I'm going to look on Friday.
Yeah, okay.
I've got access on Friday. I've got access on Friday to one of the 2 beds.
All right.
And we're going to try and mirror that as was the intention. So.
All right. Okay. Look, if you were building a 2-bed flat that was selling for 200 grand, and it was a 700 square foot flat on 800 external area, 800 times 140, now 112 grand build cost per flat. So what would we be paying for the plot? Somewhere
283.
yeah, I know it's on at 283, but I'm just working out what the value of it is. You want to be paying about 20% of 800. Yeah, I'd say that you need the plot at around 200, which makes it 50 grand. That means if you're paying 200 for the whole lot, yeah, and you're 100 grand build cost and 50 grand for each plot, that's 4 properties at 800 grand GDV. What am I doing here? Sorry, 112 grand is the build cost. The GDV, the actual selling cost is, yeah, you want to pay about 20%, which is 50 grand. So in total they're going to owe 162. By the time you've got your build buy sell cost on top of that, that's 30. That's hitting it right up with the value. So I would say the plots are worth about 40 grand each if you were building from scratch. So the whole question is going to be how much is it going to cost to build? So £135 a square foot that they're giving you the information. Times 700 square foot for a 2-bed flat, but 750 including. So your build cost is going to be somewhere around 100 grand. So you can only pay about 30 grand per plot. So we're really talking about it being worth about 120 grand and not the 200 that we're looking at. That's my gut feel, okay? But go and find out what's wrong here, because 2 2-bedroom flats and 2 1-bed flats in 1,500 square foot, it just isn't working out. Okay.
Yeah.
It's got to be a bigger.
So your gut feeling would be, And you're saying 50k per plot then really is what we should.
No, I'm saying probably 30 grand a plot.
Oh, really?
But
okay.
yeah, because the price per square foot of the end unit is what I need to know. Yeah, if they're selling for 210, but what size property is selling for 210? It's probably a 700 odd square foot property. Yeah, as a 2-bed. So if a 700 square foot is doing that, and you need 800 square foot in total for the external area, first of all, you can only build 2 of them on 1,500 square foot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got it.
And if the GDV is 800 grand, and so therefore they're valued at 200 each, you with the build cost of 100, you can only really be paying 30 grand a block, because by the time you've got all your costs, you're only going to be left with 30 grand anyway.
Yeah, there's one in the block on the market at the moment for 210, 2-bedroom.
Yeah, but just because they're on the market for that doesn't mean to say they're selling for that. So again, you've got to watch out for that as well, because if they're not 210 and they're less than that, then you're in a challenge. Okay. My rule of thumb: if it's on the market, it's no good. Okay. Because if it's on the market, it would have been run past all of their existing clients, and if it was any good, one of them would take it. And if none of them want it because it's crap, then it goes on the market.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay. And exactly that. If you put yourself in the space of the estate agent selling the plot, okay, they're going to go to their people that they know first, that are efficient and don't mess about and do a good job. And if it's a project that's profitable, one of them are going to take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Again, I'm not too sure how this came about originally, but I believe you're probably right. It went to an agent, it's got to an agent, I think, more recently.
Yeah.
Okay, Glenn, that's really appreciate that.
Okay, all right, cool.
Again, I don't want to take up too much time, but I really appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, so at the moment there are no further questions typed up, so I have answered all the questions. Unless somebody's got something else they want to type in, and in which case please come back and type your question and I'll get them answered. Palmetto said, did you have a great weekend? Yes, thank you. Although I'd run a mastermind on Saturday for my existing clients via GoToWebinar, and I had a Zoom one-day training on Sunday, which is a 4-hour thing. So Oliver said, Glenn, are you worried about the housing minister relaxing planning which could reduce house prices? I don't know how that fathoms through, Oliver. What planning are you referring to? Building extensions and being able to build two-story extensions, or being allowed to build on top of an office block, or what specific planning are you referring to? Yes, it is all about supply and demand, but we are very, very behind on the scheduled delivery of properties into the country, which is why, and yeah, it is all about supply and demand. So if all of a sudden property became available much cheaper, and I think everything finds its own level, and in any town the builders will buy it at the price where they can make a profit, and if they think the prices are dropping in that area, they're going to pay less for it. So it's a little bit of an economics question, I think. I'm fairly relaxed about the house market. I was reading all the different reports. I think the surveyors are expecting it to go down. The National Surveyors, Institute of Surveyors, are predicting, I think, a 4% drop. And I predicted before the lockdown a 5% drop when lockdown first happened. It seems to be the other way around, and from what I can see, a lot of areas are actually going up in value because everyone's being gazumped and all sorts of things. So who knows what's going to happen over the next few months as we come out of the furlough relief and more people are made redundant. Let's watch this space. I have a client who knows an economist and has known them for 30 years, and they've said they've never ever called it wrong. They've called both the previous property crashes, which were crashes because of recessions, and the recession they put interest rates right up. That isn't going to happen, so we're looking at a totally different scenario, and they don't predict a crash. So, but nobody knows. My crystal ball is a bit cloudy when it comes to where we're going. What basically I will say to you is, don't worry about it, just buy right, because if you buy right you can cater for any drop in value. If you're buying long term, then as if you've got your mortgage in place for 25 years and the property prices did drop, I'd be more worried about interest rates going up and not being able to afford the mortgage based on the rent rather than the value of the property, because the value is fairly irrelevant if you've got a 25-year mortgage. Obviously as you come towards the end of it, it becomes very relevant. Palmetto says, I know it's cheeky, but can I ask you about what you do in the scenario of the delayed completion I messaged you about? I think it's unusual, others will find it interesting as well, as it's a delayed completion, but there's land to build. And then how would you get finance on it when it's not in your name, and the vendor won't be up for having finance in his name either for the development. Right, I'll answer that last little bit. If a vendor doesn't want to put the finance in their name, it's quite easy because you take it in their name, but they just in your company name, and they just allow you to secure on the land. Okay. Obviously, if they've already got finance on the land, that makes it a whole different scenario and a challenge. It is definitely always a negotiation when the vendor's selling and doesn't want to put finance in their own name. But even if they were to take a share in a limited company, when they're insignificant shareholders, i.e. below 25%, they don't have to be part of the guarantee system. Tyan said, if you were starting out in property and a large amount of cash and time to invest, what would you do? That is a very interesting question, Tyan, and I think what I'd like to do is give you a very brief answer and potentially run a webinar on exactly that question. So the question is, if you were just starting out in property and had a large amount of cash and time to invest, what would you do? So my answer short term is, first of all, the people on the rich list are developers, not investors. Okay. Yes, I do like having an investment passive income, which is cool. I did want to build blocks of flats, but building a block of flats where they're worth, 20, 30 grand, 40 grand premium under the help to buy means that I'm losing 30 grand every time I take a buy to let on one to keep. So, why would I want to build blocks of flats? That was my original, before the help to buy way of looking at it. Build blocks of flats, sell half, keep half, rent them out, move on to the next project, using the profit that I make to gradually increase my deposit money that I've got each time, and to as my 25% deposit. Right now I would be looking at a combination of developing but selling them. I would be looking at doing delayed completions for people, with people, on specific deals that make over 100 grand, and potentially finding an area where there is capital appreciation and I can get some leverage because of the discount that I can get by marketing direct. So I'd probably be running them three scenarios. We are setting off in our journey very soon on buying 100 properties in 100 weeks, mainly to be used for HMOs up north, because we've got a trust fund that wants to buy them at 8% yield they will pay. So that's going to be an interesting thing, and could potentially be one of the strategies that I would do if I had a lot of cash. So yeah, I think that might be worthy, and I'll ask Gary to make a note of that, whether we ought to run a webinar of, Glenn, if you were just starting out in property and had a large amount of cash and time, what would you do? And maybe I'll interview 2 or 3 different of my successful clients, and we'll have a panel of 3 or 4 and ask them all the same thing. Okay, Oliver says the review of allowing planning permission so the government hits their 300,000 annual target. Okay, so you're worried about relaxing planning. No, I welcome it, Oliver. It's very hard to find a project at the moment, and a bit more planning, a few more projects, and then we can get into making a bit more profit, which is cool. Ibrahim said, would it be possible that you can give more details about your one-to-one mentorship? Much appreciated. basically, if you speak to or drop me a text, I'll put my mobile on here for you. I'll send that to you now. If you drop me a text, Abraham, I can get someone to give you a call and give you an overview of what you get for it. And then if you want a 15-minute conversation with me afterwards, we can get that arranged. So drop me a text and I'll get someone to give you a call. Oliver said the government is going to allow automatic planning permission for new houses, hospitals and surgeries. Okay, that's going to be very interesting. I've not read an article about that, Oliver, but I will have a look at it. I've been on holiday for the last little while, so I'll definitely look into it. Here we go. Palmetto said he sent me the article yesterday. So ask me that question in a few days' time when I've read the article and I'll answer it for you. Peter says, I have currently a decision in principle. Would you recommend in paying for valuation for the property I want to buy, or should I wait until everything has been confirmed first in contracts are about to change hands? When you say everything's been confirmed, if your offer's been accepted, at what point do you introduce the mortgage? I'd need to know more details, Peter. Let me just jump on. I know we're heading towards time and all of a sudden there's been a load of questions put on there. Peter, if you want to unmute yourself, I'll answer your question for you.
Okay.
Hi.
Thanks, Claire.
Right.
Yes, Claire, what I meant was like, when I say confirmed, I mean like when the mortgage has now been approved. And
yeah, what for? What is it you're buying and who you're buying it from?
Direct from a vendor, house direct from a vendor, single property.
Okay. I mean, if you've got a principal, you could exchange contracts and then process the mortgage. It makes it very hard to predict a date that they're going to be ready for. Normally they'd expect could be a 4-week completion, but if you didn't get your mortgage offer in time, I would, because what is it, 300-400 quid for a survey?
That's right, yes. Because I was afraid just in case I paid the £400 for the survey.
Mm-hmm.
But if that falls through in the next couple of weeks, then it's...
Okay. Falls through for what reason? You could get them to undertake to pay your costs if for any reason they drop out.
Okay, yes, I can do that.
That's something that will like safen things up. I know when I get a certain type of person that I don't feel comfortable with putting an offer in on one of my properties, I'll ask them for a £5,000 deposit, which is and I'll put in a £5,000 deposit as well, which is refundable on completion, but not refundable if either party drop out.
Okay.
All right. So you could.
That's good.
But you could certainly ask them to undertake to pay your fees if for any reason they drop out. Which covers, yeah, which would cover your solicitor's fees and everything. They'd probably want to put a maximum on it. So if you said to cover your fees up to a maximum of 1,500 quid if for any reason they drop out, if they're not prepared to do that, then why? What's going on?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Glenn.
All right, no problem. You're welcome. Palmetto says we agreed a price. But as the plan is to sell existing property to pay him some money out, might cause a capital gains tax implication for him. Again, Palmetto, there's a lot of moving parts in some of these deals, and you really need to know all of the moving parts before you do the structure. And if he's going to get more money, then he will have to pay more capital gains tax because you're offering him more. I've really got to try and understand the whole situation, Palmetto. So, right, if this is his primary residence, and has he got a plot on the side? Okay, so yes, if he's selling the plot on the side, he will have to pay capital gains on the plot. But if he's selling his existing property, then he won't. So it's how you structure it and how much of the purchase is for the plot and how much of the purchase is for the house. So you could probably tweak that a little bit to your favour. You're buying the whole amount including his house, okay. So well, if you're paying because of the plot in the garden and so therefore it's getting more money, don't forget the buy-sell cost of his house, if you're actually physically buying it, will add to the cost of the plot quite significantly. So yeah, I mean, it really is something that, as I said to you before, is exactly the type of reason why people join our mentoring program, so I can hold your hand through it. And you know, not many people join at the end of a deal, they join at the beginning of the deal because that's when they need me. Best says, what would you recommend a new investor with 10 grand? Potentially to look at doing some kind of delayed completion with the vendor where you've got to spend 10 grand, or find a JV partner and spend a bit more on someone's house and at least double your money. So, you know, do a refurb with someone and say, look, I'll put 10 grand in and do the refurb, you know, hopefully I'll put 30 grand on the price, and you get your 10 grand plus 10 grand. And then they get 10 grand of the uplift. So that was that. Taylor said yes, it'd be great to do the webinar where we look at what people that have been successful would do now if they were starting off. Bev is asking for Dean's 5% deposit. We need to do, Bev, is email info@glenarmstrong.com and they will send you the list of properties and introduce them. You'll say you haven't had a reply yet. I can't pick it up from here, but if you actually send me an email to glenn@glenarmstrong.com, Bev, I will forward it on and make sure they do get it and deal with it. So, okay, look, we're coming up to the end of 1 hour. I hope this evening's been helpful for you and you've had your questions answered, or you've learnt something from other people's questions. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I know on Wednesday we have our section 24 person on, again, answering questions on structuring, refinancing or not refinancing but restructuring the way you hold properties so that you don't have to pay section 24 anymore. And tomorrow we're just waiting for confirmation from somebody to see whether they can come on again. So have a good evening, take care, make sure you stay safe. I think we've got a little bit of a bounce back situation with cases going up, so don't be complacent, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all again tomorrow evening. And for those of you on here that are on my mentoring program, the weekly webinar for deal analysis is tomorrow at 11. So take care, have a great evening, and I'll speak to you all again very soon.